We're back. Another podcast episode.
Another podcast.
It's just you and I.
Another class.
Yeah, another class. For you, did being online only, did the summer fly by?
Yeah, summer always flies by. I was telling you this, I think after like the first few weeks, like it really is an accelerated EMT class.
I think we used to do every other week would be a busy week, but it seemed like there would be gaps of like certain weeks were slow on the lab end, and then certain weeks would be like back-to-back busy weeks.
So what I tried to do this time is instead of having them come to class 2 times a week, then 4 times a week, I tried to have them go 3 times a week over the course of the whole summer.
So, but I didn't notice that though. Like, so some like what I'm trying to hear, what I'm hearing you say, our goal is to swap, like flip flop. So like there'd be maybe 2 lectures, 1 lab, or 1 lecture, 2 labs. But there were weeks where it's like 2 lectures, 2 labs.
Yeah, because there was a few adjustments we had to make throughout the way. Summer is tough. It's tough on us because like you typically think of summer and you're like, oh, summer is like relaxing and resetting. But like we are working harder in the summer than we are over the course of the year. And it's tough. It's tough to do an accelerated program because, especially at the beginning of the class and the end of the class, I'm like maybe teaching twice at Christ, twice with Chicago EMT training, the summer class, and maybe I'm teaching once for the fall class. So it's like I'm teaching 5 nights a week. Yeah. It's tough. And I think that you and I, we talked about it, and we talked about some plans that we have to maybe adjust it a little bit when we do our next summer class. And I think what it really boils down to is kind of just instead of making our fall schedule fit into the summer and spring schedule fit in the summer, I think we really just need to build a new schedule for the summer. And, maybe doing lecture twice a week every week, but changing it to maybe a 3-hour lecture instead of a 4-hour lecture. Because it's tough. It's like I said, it's tough on us. And you think of the summer as being, again, like, oh, this time to hang out and with the family
that's the fall
fun.
and spring for me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's kind of the way it is. I guess it's kind of a balance for me because I'm not teaching paramedic over the summer. We're prepping for the paramedic class, which is still a lot of work. But I think so there might be a little bit of a balance, but like it's crazy because we'll be like in the first unit and it's like, okay, week 2, we have exam this week, and people are like,
it
what?
Catches students off guard.
Yeah, and I think that maybe you and I have to, and I said this, I think we really need to advertise it as not just the summer program, but like accelerated summer program.
Okay. Because
I think that students do have some struggles with that, and it's understandable.
Yeah.
And it really, I think that these people are trading their summer to become an EMT.
Well, I want them to be aware that they are trading their summer. Yeah. Some people are unaware, right?
No, and they don't understand how much effort that it takes. And, and as this summer class, I think it was largely a success. I think all our classes are a success, but I think that with this summer class, I had a good time teaching it.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, I thought, a lot of good engagement with students, but we did see some students who, like really, they're like, oh yeah, I am trading my summer for this. And sometimes they find out too late. That they're going to go through that.
Correct me if it's otherwise, but it's just for some reason seemed like the summer class, I noticed that it was a more than usual number of students that made it to the end that didn't pass.
Yeah, well, I think that a lot of people struggled with the final. And what that tells me is, because we didn't, I mean...
I think most of these students, though, have had a hard time with the entire class, though.
Yeah, I do. I agree. But I think the final was kind of like, you can't shake the final. And I think that this is, and we'll talk about it in a moment, but this is one of the reasons that we adopted the policy we adopted. Like, I'm not changing the way I teach, right?
No.
And I'm not changing the tests
So
difficulty.
what's going on?
So what's the difference? And I mean, there could be a lot of things. And I think with the summer, it's a lot of people are just studying to pass that test. You know, I'm cramming to pass Unit 1 tests. I'm cramming to pass Unit 2 tests. But there's a lack of retention, and that is proven by the final score. And, you know, if people can't pass that final, they're going to struggle on the national. And I mean, but we've had students, we had a student this class who almost got 100% in the class.
Highest grade I've ever seen.
Yes.
It was a 98.
And so you see people who are,
You know what they said when I was like, what did you do? And they shrugged. They're like, studied. I'm
Yeah,
like,
tried.
It is really that simple sometimes, isn't it?
But they did so well in the class where we had people who didn't. And I mean, I saw some of our highest grades, and I've seen some of our lowest grades.
Yeah.
And, you know, if I was going to, you know, talk to the EMS experts, the education experts, they would probably say, well, we shouldn't be accepting all these students, you know, and that there should be some pre-acceptance.
So you think
process.
so because the quality of the program goes down with a certain number of students?
No, I think that they say, well, we should be able to sniff out people who are meant to do this.
Have like a filter.
But I disagree with that.
Like an entrance exam or prereqs.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
I disagree.
We
I
never
mean,
did that.
Well, I did, and I disagree with that. And I just and people who want to implement that, that's fine. But I think that EMT should always remain a low bar to entry.
Yeah.
Because this is the first portion, the first kind of entry point into the field.
Yeah, it's such an it's such
Paramedic school should be tough to get in, but EMT school should, in my opinion, you should sign up and be able to go. Someone should understand what they're getting themselves into.
It's a disproportionate risk, though.
Yeah.
Well, when I say the amount, maybe not. It's the direct correlation of the amount of work, you know, and what you can get out from it is proportionate. But when I think of entry level healthcare positions, it's such a disproportionate, you know, barrier to entry versus the number of opportunities that open once you have that EMT license. For sure.
Yeah, and it's less distilled, so there's a lot more stuff you can do with the EMT license.
Yeah. You know, I heard someone was charging like over 2 G's for a CNA class. When my jaw dropped. I'm like, really? And it's shorter. It's shorter than our class.
I don't want to hate on anybody's decision to do anything. In my opinion, and this is my opinion, but we're taking controversial, thoughts here, and we're saying controversial things. Unless you want to be a nurse, there's no reason to become a CNA. If you're looking for or I would say, unless you want to be a CNA or a nurse, you should not become a CNA. When people are like pre-med and they decide to do CNA instead of EMT, that makes no sense.
You would think it just stems from a lack of knowledge of what might come from these certifications.
I mean, CNAs. Again, this is probably going to piss a lot of people off.
Well, we have CNAs in the program.
Well, CNA is a non-clinical position. It's not health. It's healthcare, but you're not treating. It's an assistant. That is what it is. And it's a lot of moving. It's a completely necessary field. But if your goal is to practice medicine
assessments
or
and
treatment,
interventions,
it's not that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're mostly trained on maybe how to give out medications.
Yeah.
But you're not really. It may be vital signs, but you're not really trained to treat people. $2,000 for CNA seems like highway robbery. And, you know, when you look at even cost of EMT programs, I mean, a lot of them...
I can't imagine CNAs making a significantly higher hourly rate either. So it's like, how are programs getting away with charging that much, you know?
Ignorance? I don't know.
Well, okay. I mean, enough of ragging on CNAs. But like, Are you looking forward to the competency protocol?
Yeah. So it's something I've been thinking about for a while. So to kind of give a little background, Victor and I decided that when you pass, so we've always took this stance of like our class isn't pass fail. It is successfully complete, not successfully complete. So pretty much what we had said is that there's a few components that you need to successfully complete the class. And successful completion is the only pathway to take the national registry. So you need to pass the class with an 80%. So that's the successful element. And then complete, you need to complete all the clinical, take all the exams. And you can't miss them more than 12 hours of the course. So we added another component, and that is you must pass all the written exams, including the final, with a 70%, and that you must also pass the
practical component.
component.
And if you don't, like on the days that we review, let's remediate. I think we and the instructors will spend more meaningful time, as we tried to do with CPR, identifying why people got what they got wrong, and then, make a call like how close was it, or should we be more objective? And if someone clearly still it's like you need to redo it. Like within 1 week, they're going to get an opportunity to redo the exam, and they need to get above a 70.
Yeah.
And if they don't, they're going to be disqualified from taking the national.
They're going to the score they earn first is the one that's recorded.
We're not changing scores. It's your opportunity to stay in the class.
Yeah.
And when I say stay in the class, we also won't remove you from the class because there's inherent value in the class. You just will be disqualified from taking the national.
Yeah, and the reason why we took, and this stands for people who've taken the program with us before. I mean, we have people who've taken the program who probably ended up passing the class. I mean, even this summer session, who maybe didn't fulfill that criteria. And the reason why we're doing that is, one of Victor's favorite words is holistic, whole. You can't have an EMT who is good at medical but can't do trauma.
For some reason that happened. Like I guess I just haven't noticed it in previous classes, but a significant number of students that historically did well on the first 3 exams, 80s, fell short below 70. They were like in the 65. And like, I have no doubt that if we remediated them, they would all pass. Yeah. But we didn't do that because we're not trying to implement this halfway through a class.
No, yeah.
But let's, for some reason, we didn't remediate them. They have no problem getting in.
We did remediate.
Sorry, yeah. We didn't objectively measure if they could, get above a 70 on the second try.
Yeah.
These students will have no problem getting an 80 in the rest of the class. Yeah. We just don't know if they will be deficient in a certain area of the class.
Yeah. So another thing is we can't have students who are just good at written tests but can't do the practical.
Yeah.
Because we've had that before.
Yeah.
And
I'm a poor test taker. I'm good. I love the hands-on.
And it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because there's no way to objectively determine whether or not you're that you have a competency with knowledge other than testing.
Yeah.
That's the only way we can determine that. And there's no way that we can say you're competent with hands-on skills and assessment without practical testing. And you really have to have it all. You can't be deficient in one thing, because as a EMT or paramedic, you are called to anything.
Yeah.
You're not like, oh, I just do this type of EMS. I don't do trauma. I don't do OB.
Yeah.
And you really need to be, competent in everything.
I feel like every class we get better at providing more and more resources and sharing on the day one of where to find my Brady Lab questions, like pre-test, post-test quizzes. I'm curious if I just didn't pay attention in college, but other classes tried to provide as many resources, and I just was not privy to them.
Well, we went to a school where, and for most of the classes we took, not all the classes, but most of the classes we took, that teaching was not someone's primary focus there. A lot of it was research.
Yeah.
So they didn't always put tons of effort into education.
Wasn't top of mind.
But we had some teachers who were great. What was her name? Sandy.
For what class?
Our microbiome teacher.
Oh, okay.
She actually had a master's in education.
Oh, wow.
So she liked to teach. We had Dr. Featherstone, R.I.P. He was my cell biology teacher.
Doesn't ring a bell.
And he liked to teach.
Wow.
But then I had some people like in organic chemistry that they made it very clear they don't give a rat's ass about teaching.
Yeah.
And people struggle in those classes because they're not being taught.
Yeah.
And I think that our primary focus here is teaching. Yeah. So we want our students to succeed. So we want to share those examples. It's whether or not people take us seriously when we say, hey, you should do this, hey, you should do that.
The other tip, I saw this 2 classes ago, a student doing this. Not only were they noting on the side of the Scantron in blank space which questions gave them a hard time, they denoted the letter of the answer that they were wrestling with. So when they reviewed the Scantron, review was very effective and efficient. Or I don't know if I told you this, but certain students in the last class use ChatGPT as a resource for patient scenarios. Like, can you give me interactive EMT patient scenarios? Yeah. Which is another challenge for EMTs if they don't have associated signs or symptoms or the chief complaint.
When you need them. Dun, 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 dun. Judgment's Day is coming.
That was the best one.
Yeah. Well, it's those people who take responsibility for their doing well, or because education's not passive. You're not just going to absorb it through listening to us talk. Like I like to say, like, it doesn't matter what you understand, folks. I mean,
or what you feel like you understand.
No, you need to know it. And the only way to know it is to test whether you know it. So, I mean, I hate when we have a student that puts all this time and effort into like coming to the class, paying to the class, that they end up not being successful.
Yeah.
But what else are we going to do?
I feel like we always do a good job. I know we're always improving, but like good job at laying down the dots, giving the keys to the Ferrari, and they just got to just connect the dots and take off.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know.
And they need to work on their own.
Yeah.
And they need to work. It's work. And procrastination is not your friend.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing people struggle with.
I mean, if you were to do smaller chunks every day, what is the bare minimum every day? Like 45 minutes to an hour, like every day though?
Well, I think it depends on the week. I think you need to look at how many pages you have to read, look how many available days you have to do work, and divide it. And then you have to make time to, after I read that chapter, to do those pre-test, post-test homeworks. Yeah. So I think it varies week to week.
Yeah.
But it does require you to put effort, and the people who are most successful are going to be the ones who do it every day.
Do you notice in almost over 12 years that you've been doing this, is there a certain chapter that really unlocks, like is a tipping point for our students of like, I'm starting to get it? Is it shock or is it something else?
Well, I would say that the first unit of the class, there's 2 tough chapters. And one's anatomy, which is just like, it's a lot of info. The other one is pathophysiology, which is pretty much a hypoperfusion part 1. So I think that is where the rubber meets the road, where you need to start to understand these concepts. And if you don't have a foundation there, then you start to struggle. I think that a lot of students, it's not like, it clicks and makes but you see some students just start to take off.
Yeah. And then some are in the back.
And I think it's the sciencey stuff.
Okay.
And it's really unit 2. That's when we start to have those issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have our graduation gala coming up. Any thoughts? Are you looking forward to it? It's like, I feel like we did a great one last summer, and I think it's still a good idea to just do one once a year.
Yeah.
And we have a good number of our fall students, spring students coming through. like, for example, Alyssa Whitaker, I don't know, she might be listening, but she was a bartender at the last one and she killed her spring class.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on our upcoming graduation?
I think it's a really cool event for us to, well, I don't really get to interact with many people in a like without a screen. So it's an awesome opportunity for me to interact with people kind of face to face.
I'm going to ask for your autograph.
Yeah, I'm real, I promise. It's also very useful for me to, I think, to kind of meet some of our stakeholders that you interact with regularly, and for them to like really our stakeholders are not so much our students, but the family of our students, to really see what we've cultivated here and how hard those students actually did work. And, you know, when I became an EMT, I didn't have any family or friends who were EMTs. So, you know, my parents didn't know, my family didn't know what it meant to be an EMT. And I think this is a really cool opportunity for communicating a lot of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Stakeholders, partners, potential vendors that, you know, for those that aren't aware already, like there's going to be like a 2-hour career fair post ceremony, and I'm just trying to create an opportunity for our new grads to see what's possible with this EMT license and what organizations are available to them. You know, like let's say position of dispatcher. It's just like, you don't think about that as a job, and OEMC is going to be there. You know, state police, sheriff's office, CPD, CFD.
And I mean, like, another thing is like, we didn't really spare any expenses here.
No.
Like, so when you think of like a small business, like, and this is a small business, able to kind of create an event like that, it's something to really kind of be proud of and to notice. And I hope people really do take the opportunity to really kind of soak in, you know, the whole event. And just kind of, it's a EMS kind of party, I guess you can say. You know, it's a formal party where, again, like, everybody who knows us, everybody who kind of spends time with us, you know, on the background, like stakeholders, family, and all these people who are like in our students' corner, they really get to see what it's all about. And that's why it's such a cool event, to just kind of, you know, I guess it's kind of like a celebration of EMS, and we're just kind of the facilitators when it comes to that.
Yeah. You know, there was a time when the podcast was born, a different podcast, when I felt burnt out teaching this.
Yeah.
It was around the time when I left the fire department, and you start teaching something you're no longer a part of. And ironically, here we are. And this has truly become like a vessel to impart some life wisdom through the lens of emergency medicine and EMT work. And it's been the greatest, you know, thing for me. And there's still challenge in that, you know, challenge in like, how do we improve the experience? How do we help individuals learn these life skills? So I don't feel burnt out at all. I look forward to the work that we do. I look forward to all the new students that come through. And that being said, you know, we were recently requested, and plenty of other professionals can comment on this as well, but we were requested for like an interview on the current shortage. We still have this shortage of first responders and EMTs and paramedics. You know, as an educator, as well as someone who's educator on both the paramedic side and the EMT basic side, as well as someone who's active in the field, like, do you feel that as an active provider? Do you see that? Because like on day one, we saw an increased demand or desire to go pursue paramedic school. So I think it won't happen overnight, but we're starting to see it come back.
Yeah, I think the shortage is definitely fixing itself.
Okay.
Or it's improving.
Is that because on the employer side, that side is improving?
I think that employers are paying more.
Okay.
It is, and there's more opportunity. And I think people are starting to see that. Like when I first became a paramedic, like, you know, XYZ fire department pays, you know, you max out $100,000 after 6 years, and we're hiring 2 people. 200 people are testing for that. Now XYZ fire department is paying you 120 after 3 years. And
how many people?
And there's only 20 people testing
my
for 10
goodness.
spots. So you see that people are noticing that it makes more sense
Yeah.
to kind of
That's good.
pursue that field.
I wonder where the money came from. Or you think it's like federal money, like grants?
Well, I
or
think
like,
it's just budgeting. They're like, okay, we need to budget different.
I see.
I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, Chicago's a different situation though. I mean, like they're still limited, but like if you're in, no slight against Chicago Fire Department, but like if I'm going to tell you, would you rather work for a fire department where you make more money and you do half the call volume? Where would you rather work? And I think a lot of people rather do less work and make more money. And I think the Chicago Fire Department's biggest struggle, not to make a huge comment on the city of Chicago, is that they haven't had a contract in almost 4 years, which is insane. They're not paid enough. They're forced overtime and this forced, like when you have like firefighters being pulled off their apparatus to work the ambulance. It's not good for EMS. It's not good for the people who are doing it.
Yeah.
And people know that. So if you make the job easier, meaning you're not doing all these calls, you're not having to do all this
fix
stuff. More people will be interested in it. And it's not an easy fix. I mean, I've talked with a few EMS field chiefs about this, and they have their opinion on how things could be fixed, but it's not an easy fix.
What are the main three demands? Is it more pay? Like what would the new contract look like? Like, is it more pay, more ambulances, more providers?
I think the biggest thing they're struggling with is not enough paramedics on the streets.
Okay.
And to get more paramedics on the streets, you need more ambulances. You need more paramedics. And to get more paramedics, you need better pay. You need better benefits. You need an easier job. You need a lot of stuff. And Chicago's struggling with some things that they've historically always struggled with. Some people love the city, love the idea of the city. It's their city. They want to support it. But other people are just as happy working in the suburbs, making more money. So I think it's a complicated issue.
Yeah.
I don't have the answer.
But then there are individuals that also want to just not run into burning buildings. And
that's true.
the city does it for them, right?
Single role EMS. Yeah, that's an interest of a lot of people. For a lot of people, also there's no age limit. So people who get into this field later,
we do have a few of those individuals in the class right now.
Yeah. So if they because to be a firefighter, paramedic, I guess people should know this. You got to be under 35.
Okay.
To be working for like a municipal
Racing
government.
the clock right now.
So yeah. Well,
For some people, not me. I'm just for some people.
I passed the clock. But for some people, that's not an option. So they still want to be in the field. CFD is your option. But there's also contract EMS out there, which the benefits aren't as good. But there's a lot of
They've come a long way though.
Yeah.
What is it like? Is it 70 around mid
some are
70,
making
80,
80s, yeah. Where they used to be making in the 40s.
Right.
But I think CFD has a lot of benefits. I just think that a lot of people aren't willing to always, especially as they get older, willing to really kind
Put up with it?
Put themselves out there.
Okay. All right. I couldn't agree more. I think that's all I had.
Me too.
For now. That was a very efficient episode. That's sub 30 minutes.
Wow. Do I get a prize?
I guess what are some topics or who are some guests? It just couldn't work in August and September, but like who are some guests that we're hoping to have on?
Yeah, I want to get a nurse in here.
Okay.
And I want to talk about the kind of how an ED nurse and how an emergency department nurse interacts with paramedics and EMTs, and maybe here's some of how we could be better.
Okay.
And I want to also voice my thoughts of how they could be better. And consequently, I want to have a paramedic, experienced, seasoned 911 based paramedic, and kind of hear their perspective of how the field is, and maybe talk a little bit kind of about some of the frustrations they have working in the field and how they think it could be better. I think that guests are really what we want to do. And I think what we want to start talking about controversial topics in healthcare and EMS and just kind of formulate some discussion.
Yeah. I mean, Ruthie and Nick came to mind. So
Yeah.
I think they're already aware that we want to chat with them and we want you guys. So that'll happen soon. We're not rushing it, but it'll happen eventually.
Yeah.
All right. Till then, see ya.
Adios.